This episode of the Esoteric Order of Roleplayers is brought to you by the generosity of our backers on Patreon. Go to patreon.com/esotericrp to find out how you can become a backer too. We create and broadcast these episodes live on native lands. We acknowledge these are unceded lands, with diverse communities maintaining connections to these places, and recognize their ancestors, their elders both past and present, and future generations. Learn more by visiting the Native American Rights Fund website at narf.org. Space, the final frontier. These are the voyages of me, David Larkins, and I'm going where I've never gone before. Confession, Lieutenant Junior Grade Wyn Cedino. I hereby confess to the murder of Captain Jace Galvin and the attempted murder of Commander Verena Kerensky. I would like the record to show that my so-called accomplices, Lieutenants Frakes and Kreisar, were not involved in this incident and are wholly innocent. The circumstances leading to Captain Galvin's death are as follows. How's that for a dramatic opening? Oh yeah, alright, we're in it. Visions of Futures Past, Part 2. So yeah, I decided to kick things off a little differently this time. Actually, the rule book, does present some ideas for alternative story structures, and it talks about in medias res openings, including the flashback approach, which we will be using here for this, our last mission, for now, of Captain's Log. When I started this back in January, way back in January, the EOR's docket was relatively clear. I wasn't really seeing anything getting released for a while, and just wanted to work on something in the meantime, put something out there on the feed and get a little experimental, as I talked about in session 0. So here we are, continuing with our experimentations. And also, frankly, I am now finding myself running more things, whereas back in January I was just a player. A player in what, you might ask? Well, you, dear listener, will soon find out. But that's a topic for another day. And let's just focus on wrapping up Captain's Log. Well, Wyn's in trouble. Captain Galvin's dead. Her mentor, Commander Kerensky, wounded. Almost dead. At Wyn's hands. What happened? I don't know. That's part of the fun, isn't it? Yeah, no, I don't know. I sat down and I just started writing an opening log, and that's what came to me. So I'm like, screw it. That's what we're going to go with. Now, just as a quick review from last time, I knew going in we were going to be dealing with a court-martial situation. Initially, I was thinking, it's a court-martial for insubordination because Wyn refused to teleport off the Borg sphere when everyone else did. Thought she'd play the hero. Thought she'd, do the valiant last stand. And instead just, got on Captain Galvin's bad side. But I guess I just kind of figured let's up the stakes a little bit, because we also ended the last session with Wyn and Frakes and Kreisar in the brig. Why? Because of this meddlesome alien amoeboid. Yes. So what's going on there? what do our friends, the Wami Ogopa, have to say for themselves, right? I was thinking about this quite a lot, actually, after the last session, because as I touched on at the end of the last session, we're dealing with a pretty common, from my perspective, a pretty common trope in Star Trek, which is some kind of non-humanoid species or entity which comes along and sort of promises a sort of transhuman existence. And obviously this has been, it is fascinating to me to look back on the missions so far and see these themes come up over and over again. We have themes of, alien entities trying to merge with humanity and make humanity something more than what it currently is. So a transhuman kind of thing. We have Wyn, who's a trans person. We have themes of, identity and questioning, what does it mean to be me? What does it mean to be human? And these are very Star Trekky questions. Strecky questions. So, it's pretty cool. That's why I'm saying, on balance, my opinion of Captain's Log, in spite of, occasional struggles with the material, very positive. I feel like this was a distinctly Star Trek experience that I've been having up till this point and will presumably continue to have. I don't feel like this was some generic sci-fi game. It's done a really good job of sort of capturing that Star Trek vibe, So, that all being said, sometimes Star Trek gets a little dark, obviously. Sometimes it gets a bit heavy. And I think, call this a season finale, call this a series finale, what have you. First of all, classic to end off on a two-parter, but also this is really the time to pull out all the stops. Let's get a little wild with it. So we've got a Starfleet JAG court-martial situation. Also, the mission specifically that I rolled up was advise Starfleet on enemy species. So the question still remains there. Are we talking about the Ogopa? Are we talking about the Borg? It's an enemy species. Remember, the Ogopa were rolled up as a friendly species. So have to resist the urge to make them into some kind of sinister corrupting force or whatever, So I'm thinking that if there is any sort of negativity with the Ogopa, it's not their fault. It's the law of unintended consequences at work. Maybe they thought by going to Earth and merging with humanity that it would be a win-win situation for everyone. Turns out not so much. And if that's the case, then I need to decide what that means. And I have some ideas percolating already. But we've got the incident is transformed still. So again, we're really, hitting that theme. Transform. Speaking of theme, again, this isn't really a theme, but setting maybe. Quarantine zone makes total sense. And I think for the flashback, obviously the opening log is taking place in some much larger facility where Wyn is being held prisoner. But for the flashback, we're going to go back to the quarantine zone, which is effectively the Kyushu. I'm just thinking it's, the Kyushu shows up at Earth. And, it's confined to orbit. No beaming downs, no beaming ups. None of that. Everyone has to stay on board Kyushu. Advantage, historic precedent. This was interestingly worded because it's basically saying go back to one of your earlier missions and look for something that could be relevant to the current mission that would help you solve the problems that are confronting the crew. So, of course, the first thing that popped in my head when I got that was their encounter with the Borg, and maybe learning something from that to apply in the Agopa case. But we'll see. I also went ahead and rolled up a JAG officer, since we haven't had a Tellarite yet, which, I know this is purely auditory. There are no visuals. Thank God. Tellarite, for those of you who don't know, I believe in the original, they're one of the original alien species, humanoid species from the original series, and so therefore canonically one of the founding species of the Federation. But I'm pretty sure in the original series it was literally just a guy in a pig mask. and yeah, I mean, if you're familiar at all with the skit from I Think You Should Leave, with the pig wearing the Richard Nixon mask, I mean, kind of same vibes, So anyway, but that being said, I figure we've had a Vulcan, we had an Andorian. Yeah, let's complete the trifecta. Let's have a Tellarite as the JAG officer. So we've got Captain Jar, standing in the wings, waiting for their entrance, their moment. And I just want to touch on Captain Jar briefly, though, because I went through the whole non-player character matrix progression. There's just a bunch of different matrices to roll on if you want to. I decided to roll on every single one, and I got some interesting results. I'm just kind of laying the groundwork here for where my brain is going to go, and some of the pieces that we'll be picking up along the way. So for archetype, I got Doctor. Now, it's interesting that that's archetype. So Captain Jar could be also a doctor, either a medical doctor or a doctor of something else. Doctor of jurisprudence. Doctor of philosophy. Who knows? But it's more of an archetype. So Captain Jar might not even be a doctor. It might just be more like they have the sort of bearing of a doctor. They come across like a doctor in that they're very sort of observational, and when it is time for them to speak, they speak with great authority, and they have a deep base of knowledge to draw from. Could be like that. Okay, fine. Upbringing. I mentioned this last session in terms of how wild some of these matrices are with the results that you can generate. I mean, need I harp on the fact that the carbon-based life form table, when you roll to see what kind of life form it is, there's only a 20% chance that it's an animal, right? That's how we landed on the Agope being protists. So, yeah, and then there's just tons of really wacky results that are not weighted. That's the other thing. When you roll on these matrices, it's usually 20 different options for your 20-sided die. So each option has a flat 5% chance of popping up. So it's not even like some of the more outre options are, well, yeah, if you roll a 1, but if you roll a 2 through 7, you're going to get a blah, It's nothing like that. And so I got one of these outre results because I rolled under upbringing, mind you. Upbringing, I'm expecting something like what I had with Wyn. Captain Jar grew up on a colony planet somewhere or whatever. No, I got another universe. So Captain Jar is from another universe. I'm guessing the mirror universe? I mean, that's the... As far as I know off the top of my head, I mean, that's the one everyone knows, right? For Star Trek, everyone knows the mirror universe. So possibly, yeah. Maybe Captain Jar came over here from the mirror universe and was like, oh, thank God. Mirror universe sucks. I hate it. Much better over here. Yeah, maybe. Another universe. Another possibility, of course, is that Captain Jar came over. See, this gets us into some real wacky stuff, right? Because it's possible that we're not in the universe where the Kyushu is destroyed at the Battle of Wolf 359. Right. So, what do they call the latter day, the new Star Treks? Is it like the Kelvin timeline or something like that? Maybe we're in the Kelvin timeline. Who's to say? But there's a lot to play with there. There's a lot going on there. Can definitely make some hay from our JAG officer being from another universe. And then the rest of the stuff. I mean, interestingly enough, for goals, I rolled stop an event from happening. So that was something. His tactics, he tends to put on a grandiose show. So he's one of these like theatrical judges / lawyers, right? And he idolizes the Federation. That's cool. So he's very interested. He's very invested in keeping things the way they are, especially if he's from the mirror universe. I could see how he would definitely be quite invested in, like, I'm not going to live like that again. I'm not going to let my life end up there in a world like that, in a universe like that. So I have to do everything in my power to maintain the order, to maintain things the way they are, and not let the apple cart get upset, so to speak. So there's that. And then, like I said, I'm still trying to figure out how we want to approach this classic trope of the non-humanoid species offering something that's seemingly unambiguously positive and yet also transforming, life-altering, possibly world or culture-altering. And then the heroes of the story, our brave Enterprise crew or what have you, essentially saying, nah, if it sounds too good to be true, it is too good to be true. There's some hidden drawback here, or maybe the drawback isn't even that hidden. We're not going for it. A weaker-willed crew might have given in, but not us, the heroes of this TV series. So that's a pretty time-honored, possibly time-worn trope. And I'm debating how much to lean in on that. What we established so far is that if you get some of these agopas, not agapes, agopas in your system, that their consciousness kind of merges with yours, and you get essentially psionic powers, at least telepathy, but also what appears to be something that's sort of mood altering. Now, in the case of Wyn, and Lieutenant Frakes, it was a positive development because that sort of telepathic and emotional shift that occurred allowed them to be open with each other about their true feelings and sort of form this instant bond, this instant connection. In the sort of classic Trek trope application, one direction I could go in would be, well, that's not going to be the same for everyone. If you're really miserable, maybe, if you're dealing with depression or just you're unhappy with your life, and you get one of these agopas in your system, suddenly it's just going to make everything seem worse. Another way to go, and it's not necessarily mutually exclusive, it could be both of these things, is that, sure, the telepathy's kind of cool when you first get it, and especially if you're using it to connect with someone that you're secretly in love with. But what happens if you can't turn it off? What happens if you hear everyone's thoughts? And the next time you're talking to someone you considered a dear friend and you overhear their thoughts where they think, oh my God, is this person ever going to shut up? And, not going to be that fun anymore, right? So that's certainly a possibility. In terms of the friendliness, this might be intentional on the part of the Agopa. Maybe they're here to sort of teach as a teachable moment for humanity. Be careful what you wish for. You might just get it. How many more cliches can I work in to this session? But I'm just saying, that could be intentional on their part. Maybe they go around to a bunch of different planets and they do this thing. They sort of teach these lessons of well, you might think that you want these things. You might think that you want to be able to read people's thoughts, and you might think that you want to be happy all the time. Let's just say, for the sake of argument, that that's the case. That's the effect it has on everybody. But when it comes down to it, you find that gets to be fairly boring after a while, or bothersome, like I say. Even if you can turn the telepathy on and off, it would still be bothersome, for sure. So, yeah, that's certainly a possibility. But yeah, let's just get into it, because I have no idea what the hell happened. Why did Wyn kill Captain Galvin? Is he really dead? That's another classic Trek trope. Is you think one of the main characters gets killed, and turns out it was either a fake out, or it wasn't as bad as it looked at first, or oh no, that was actually Captain Galvin's double from the Mirror Universe. That's not a bad idea, actually. I might go with that. So we'll see. But yeah, let's jump in, and we'll do the flashback. The write-up on how to do an in medias res opening with a flashback was a little unclear how to do that, but seemed to be telling me to do one thing that didn't make a lot of sense to me. I think what it's telling me to do is to identify the scene number, because remember we have 15 scenes and they're numbered 1 through 15 here on the mission sheet. So I think it was telling me to identify the scene number that we are opening in, okay, and then figure out what scene we're flashing back to, and then I guess return to the current scene. So this might actually be a somewhat truncated mission, because it seems to be saying, I might, for instance, say that that's a classic act break, a break right before the third act. So I could say that our opening log was taking place in scene 10. and that the murder of Captain Galvin takes place in scene 5, which is the act break between 1 and 2. So, maybe that's where the flashback goes to. And then we go forward in time. Or we skip ahead. That's it. So, because they were talking about like 2 different ways to do in medias res, and one was they called the catch up, not the condiment, but the catch up, and cat's up. and in that one you would kind of go, okay, we're starting in scene 10, we're going to jump back to scene 5, then we're going to play 6, 7, 8, 9, and then we're going to catch up with scene 10 and then go forward from there. With the flashback, it seemed to be saying, in this case, we're marking scene 10 as where that confession happens. We're going to flash back to scene 5, and then we're going to jump back to 10, and then we're going to play through the remaining scenes, which would be just 5 more scenes. I think what I might end up doing is just having multiple flashbacks, right? Because if we start by flashing back to Captain Galvin's death in scene 5, we go back to 10, and then we go back to scene 3, for example. Oh, how did that, how did we get to this point where Captain Galvin dies? That sort of thing. So I think that's what we're going to do. And so I'm going to establish scene 10 before we do the flashback or anything like that. So that opening log, let's picture, just a black screen with Wyn's voice speaking out through the darkness. And as the confession is nearing its close, we fade out of the black, and the shot resolves into a well-lit, very sleek, well-appointed Federation courtroom somewhere on Earth. We don't know where, because we're within the bowels of this larger complex. So obviously we can infer that for whatever reason, Wyn is no longer quarantined. Interesting. So that would be another question to address, is why would that be? But anyway, Wyn is there, dressed uniform, on the witness stand, so to speak, and giving testimony. And we've got good old Captain Jar presiding, and we've got lawyers, I suppose, advocates, present for Wyn as well as for the prosecution. And maybe Captain Galvin's face is up on a monitor screen, and Wyn looks remorseful, for sure, sad, and deeply regretful of what happened. So what did happen exactly? Asks the prosecuting attorney. And Wyn looks across the courtroom at the many unsmiling faces, those in attendance at this court-martial, looks back at the prosecutor and says, "Well, it all happened this way, sir." And we flash back to onboard Kyushu while it is still under quarantine, low Earth orbit. So as the Kyushu is orbiting Earth, we get this exterior shot. It's very calm, peaceful, classic composition, right? the blue planet shining in the background. And then we cut inside the ship, and it is the total opposite. Klaxons blaring, And red alert. I couldn't remember that term last time for some reason. Red alert in full effect. And people running to and fro up and down the halls of the ship. We're somewhere inside the ship. We don't know exactly where. And so as the last personnel kind of round the bend and disappear from view, from a side corridor, we see Wyn poking her head out to look up and down the corridor, make sure all's clear, and then she says, "This way." And she and Frakes and Kreesar all sort of crouch run out into the main corridor. I think Kreesar and Wyn both have phasers in hand, and they are clearly on a mission. So, let's think about what that mission might be. I think the most obvious choice is they're trying to escape. So I think they'd be heading for the shuttle bay. So let's do our first roll of the session. Thanks for bearing with me thus far. I know I've been talking a lot up front without doing a lot of dice rolling. It's kind of like the first session, I guess. But anyway, let's do a probability matrix roll. Has Captain Galvin anticipated this move? I'd say that it is highly probable that he's anticipated it. That is a 1. Okay. So yes, he has anticipated this move. Has he himself gone to the shuttle bay? I'd say that's probable. That's a 9. Okay. Is Kerensky with him? I'd say that's highly probable. That is a 14, so yes. And lastly, does he have a security detail with him? Again, highly probable. And that is a yes. Okay. So, we need to determine whether or not Wyn spots this, not exactly ambush, but, checkpoint, I guess, right? We need to see if she spots it in time to do something about it. So, I think we'll do security for sure, and I'm going to go with insight. So, that's an 11 or less. Got 111. Woo! The other one was a 16. Okay. That's all we needed. We just needed the one success. Alright, so Wyn, having been trained in security ops, is not going to just go running into the shuttle bay. No, she's far too clever for that. The door ahead is closed. So Wyn can anticipate that there's going to be some folks waiting for her there. She doesn't necessarily know it's Captain Galvin, but she knows that if she was in Captain Galvin's shoes, she would have certainly sent a security team to the shuttle bay as soon as word got out of their escape. So I think here is the point where we can maybe ask some questions about what other powers does the Agopa grant its host. We've established telepathy as a thing. Are we looking at maybe some clairvoyance? Some clairsentience. Usually that goes hand in hand with telepathy in your classic psionic suite of powers. So, let's call it, I don't know, probable versus somewhat probable. Let's go with probable. That is a yes. Okay. So, Wyn and Kreesar, I mean, I'm sure Kreesar also, if Wyn had failed that roll, I was going to give Kreesar a pretty highly weighted probability matrix roll. So, I'm sure Kreesar is kind of thinking the same thing. They stop, they look at each other, giving each other knowing looks, and then all three of them sort of close their eyes, concentrate for a moment. And obviously there's no rules for psionic powers in Captain's log. But I think we can go with let's go with insight plus command. It's kind of a personality test there, isn't it? And again, I get one success. So I'll say that Wyn is able to discern that there are people on the other side of the door, and that there's more of them than there are of her group. But as far as who they are specifically, I didn't generate any momentum or anything like that, so I don't think there's really any I didn't generate a focus bonus or anything like that. So yeah, I don't think there's any further details forthcoming. So she looks at the other two. She says, "Phaser's on stun." They nod. And she said, and then Kreesar says, "On my mark." And they get ready. Frakes kind of backs off a bit since he's unarmed. Wyn and Kreesar position themselves in a crouch, kind of next to the bulkheads around the door, and Wyn punches the mechanism to open the door, and with a whoosh, up it goes. And sure enough, in the shuttle bay, we see Captain Galvin standing, waiting for this moment, knowing that Wyn was going to appear, and perhaps hoping to talk with her, but she is a woman of action. She has a daring of 10 and a phaser and the willingness to use it. So I think Wyn is going to just try and hit the captain with a stun bolt. So we're into combat here, and let's do it. So we're going to do daring. We're going to do security. It's going to be a 13. Here we go. Yeah, interesting. 2 failures. An 18 and a 19. So fortunately I didn't generate any threat, although it was very close. But what Wyn didn't realize is that Galvin, being a Federation captain, he, part of his training, part of his core principles is, be willing to put yourself at risk, but only if it's for, in service to a larger plan, right? And so in this case, I'm going to say he had one of his security team positioned with kind of a what they would call an enfilading position on the bulkheads, anticipating this very move. And so one of the security team can actually see Wyn without any cover, and opens up with the stunner, and causes Wyn to do a tuck and roll out of the way as the phaser hits the bulkhead instead, but certainly nearly gets her and puts her out of her good position. We can hear Kreesar's phaser going off as well. Galvin makes a run for it. Wyn is going to continue to fire at him as he dashes away. Okay, that's more like it. 2 successes this time. No focus, but that does mean we get a momentum. I'm going to spend that immediately to do +1 damage. Okay. So Wyn is firing her phaser at Galvin as he's dashing for it, and the shots are so close, they're like whizzing past him, that he's forced to dive for cover behind one of the shuttles, and it's not very graceful. You know, he hits the ground kind of hard, maybe bangs his shoulder on the sponson on the shuttle or something, you know. Okay, so some phaser fire is exchanged. Wyn, darts across the hall so that she's sort of firing above Kreesar's head. And I think at this point, Captain Galvin, sees that the time for negotiation has passed. And so he's going to get his phaser out and return fire. So we're in a little phaser fight here. And okay, just one success, but that's all I needed. So he pops his head out, and Wyn lines it up and pops him, and down he goes. All right. So let's see here. The way the conflict rules work, I guess we could carry on to the next combat. Although I'm kind of wondering. No, I'm seeing a more dramatic turn we can go here. So you don't want to just make this a bunch of dice rolls and ticking boxes off and whatnot, right? So yeah, with Captain Galvin down, Wyn shouts, "Let's go!" And they start darting across the shuttle bay, phaser fire zinging back and forth, as basically like Wyn's just sees that if they run straight up the middle, since the security teams are on the flanks, they can't really effectively open fire without risking hitting the other team on the other side of the bay. So the shots are going a little wild. They're not. The security teams are distracted by trying not to hit their compatriots, and so we are going to make a dash for it to the nearest shuttle. And I think for that we'll go with fitness plus command, since Wyn is leading the charge. So let's say 13 or less. 2 successes. Nice. All right. And in fact, one of those is a focus, potentially. Let's see. I do have a focus in hand phasers. All right. So I'm going to say that even though Wyn is making a run for it, she's still able to get off a couple shots back at the teams. And so I'm going to say she hits a couple of the guys firing on them and knocks them down, which I'm going to roll the probability matrix here to see if the other 2 team members made it, and I'll give that probability a bump. So I'll bump it from somewhat probable to probable that at least one of them made it. And we get that. And then instead of a 50-50 chance, we'll go to somewhat probable. Did they both make it? And I got 10 under 12. Okay, great. Okay, so thanks to Wyn's pinpoint accuracy, firing on the run, all 3 of them make it to the shuttle, and they dash inside. So that would be the end of that scene, I think, for sure. Okay. So then we're gonna cut back to the interrogation, and let's see. We're gonna cut back to the interrogation, and Captain Jar leans over the table and says, yes, but I fail to see if you had the phaser set to stun how Captain Galvin might have been killed. And Wyn gets this sort of pained expression on her face, and she says, well, that's where you'll see, sir, that it wasn't our fault that this happened. And so we're going to flash back again, this time to scene 6. So Kerensky comes up on the view screen. She's still in the shuttle bay. She's dashed over to, one of the transmitters. And, of course, she's furious. And she says, Lieutenants, I order you, as acting captain of the Kyushu, to immediately surrender yourselves. Depart the shuttle. Give yourselves up. And obviously that's not really going to happen. But Wyn is going to communicate back. And she's going to say, Verena, you have been an amazing mentor to me. You taught me so much. But we now have a higher mission than that of the Federation. In 1 minute, I am going to engage the engines on this shuttle and open the outer doors. Please, take the captain. Fall back. I don't have to tell you what will happen if you all are still in this bay when those doors open. As a quick aside, I actually don't think it's Star Trek technology. I think you could probably be in the shuttle bay when the shuttle departs because of the shielding. But, we'll see. Whatever. We'll just assume that there's a point, like when the shields have to drop briefly for the shuttle to pass out through, that maybe, plus, I mean, obviously the shuttle's impulse drive, you don't want to kind of be around that without wearing protective gear, right? Yeah, that sounds reasonable. All right, so what are the odds that Kerensky is going to follow Wyn's advice? I think knowing what we know, since this is a flashback, we're going to say improbable. And yet I rolled a yes. The power of the dice. Okay. I'm just thinking of is this where everything goes wrong? Probably. I'm thinking that the most likely thing here is that Kerensky is ordering the security team to gather the captain. They're going to try and get out of there, and then something goes wrong. Wyn fires up the engines too soon or something like that, So, and if that's not the case, so really what we're determining here is whether or not Wyn is really truly at fault. Because that's going to determine whether the scene's a success or a failure, and it'll reflect on when we hop back to scene 10. Okay, so I think the best way to do that, obviously, would be to make a roll in terms of her piloting. So let's go with control plus con and see if she is, cool under pressure or not, right? Okay, so I got a 1 away from generating a focus advantage, sadly. I didn't get a 1. I got 1 success is what I meant. A single success with 1 away. I rolled a 4, and my discipline, I believe they're called, a con of 3, so close but not quite. All right, so Wyn, despite her nerves, despite everything that's just happened and the pressure of the moment, is able to keep a calm and steady hand. Okay, so now we established that she's taking the fall for her two companions. Okay, so I think here's what we're going to do. I'm just trying to think. I have an idea. There is a section in the book, to roll or not to roll, right? Let's take a look at that one really quick. Okay, so it says here, the decision to make a dice roll is completely up to you. Some solo gamers feel quite comfortable deciding the probability of success based on multiple factors like experience, areas of expertise, savviness, etc. On such occasions where it is probable that you would succeed, you may choose to forego a dice roll, or you may prefer to roll on the yes-no probability matrix and take the chance that things do not work out in your favor, thereby allowing you to envision why and how the failure occurred. You could always establish house rules that stipulate when you are required to do a probability matrix check, for example, whenever you use the ship to perform a challenge, or you can just fly by the seat of your pants and make it up as you go along. Pretty good rule of thumb to go by. If your story is becoming monotonous or mundane, roll on a random matrix. The unexpected can liven things up in amazing ways. All the templates, ideas, and matrices provided in Captain's Log are tools and aids that provide story prompts to help you to prevent writer's block. If you already have a clear vision of where your story is going, go for it. But if you need to add some tension, roll those dice. Let the game throw you off a bit. It is quite fun. I agree. It is quite fun. Okay, so I do have a clear idea of where the story is going, so I'm going to go for it. All right, so basically, Kerensky and the team retire from the shuttle bay, carrying Captain Galvin with them, and so we're going to return to the scene 10 testimonial, and the prosecutor says, and at what point, Lieutenant Cedino, did you discover that your phasers had actually been set on kill? Dun dun dun! And there's your commercial break right there, right? So, all right. So we come back. So I think we're done with the flashbacks for now. So we're going to come back to scene 10. So we gotta do a nice, juicy act break here. So. Oh, let's see. Yes, ideas are percolating. Okay, very good, very good. So Wyn is on the stand, and, for the benefit of the folks just tuning in, the prosecutor says, and at what point, Lieutenant Cedino, did you discover your phasers had been set to kill? And I think at this point, Wyn, let's give her a presence plus command roll to maintain her composure. Alright, so that is a double success, so we get some momentum for that. And so even though her eyes are swimming a little bit, she says, well, it was Lieutenant Frakes who discovered that, sir, and it was while we were inbound towards the Federation HQ. Would they be going to the Federation HQ? That's in San Francisco, right? I think so. Let's probability matrix it. I'll say it's probable. Yeah, okay. That is where they're going. And so the prosecutor says, I see. You are an experienced officer. I see by your records, you have had extensive training, top marks, really, in hand phasers. That seems like a rather amateurish mistake to make. And need I remind you, it has cost a Starfleet captain his life. And Wyn nods, very grim, mouth set, and she says, "It was never my intention, sir. Captain Galvin was a brave and courageous leader, and represented an aspiration for me." And the prosecutor says, "Well, that may well be. But at the very least, you are guilty of carelessness that has resulted in a death. At worst, you are lying to us and wished to kill Captain Galvin." And let's give Wyn another. Well, let's see. Okay, so Wyn has this momentum. Let's cash that in. Let's see where this goes. And I have some deeper ideas where this is going, so that's going to inform my decision to just go ahead and roll on that crazy old momentum advantage. What is it? Momentum spend table. I'm up for anything here, even a trade opportunity. Let's see what happens. New technology. Okay. Engine efficiency improved. God damn it. All right, never mind. All right, so let's just go with danger revealed. That sounds like fun. Okay. Federation diplomat reports danger. Oh, perfect. Okay. So before Wyn can answer, let's see. I'm going to say the proceedings are interrupted by a Commodore. I don't know if a Commodore is technically a diplomat. Could be. Maybe not. But a Commodore enters the proceeding room and says, "I am sorry to interrupt, but we are getting reports that the alien city ship is approaching Earth, and we are all to report to our emergency stations." And so, yes. That sounds good. So Captain Jar stands up and he says, "This court is adjourned for the time being. We will reconvene once the danger has passed." And then he nods at the security team and he says, "Escort the prisoner back to her holding cell." And so as the rest of the assembled courtroom files out, Wyn is taken by two security security officers? Yes. Wyn is taken by two security officers down a back corridor. All right. So let's go back. Let's review. Oh, and by the way, let's. I think we'll mark that as. Ooh, let's see. Yeah, we'll mark that as a success. Wyn kept her cool, generated momentum that ended the court-martial for the time being, and that's a good act break too. We're going into Act 3 here, so it's looking likely that this is actually just going to be a one session mission. There we go. It's looking likely it's going to be a one session mission because we're just going to do the last act here. These 5 scenes. So we definitely want to go out with a bang. Like I say, I have some ideas. Visions of futures past. Let's keep that in mind. Okay, but also the primary mission that I rolled up, the whole court-martial thing, that was just my own sort of interjection. The actual mission I rolled up on the Starfleet JAG Matrix was advise Starfleet on enemy species. So obviously, they're going to have to bring in Wyn to help them out, essentially. All right, so yeah, let's see where this all goes. So the first thing I'm going to do as we get into Act 3 is Wyn escorted all the way back to her holding cells before something else happens. And we'll just say 50-50 on that one. And that's a no. No, of course not. Of course not. No. You can't just go back to your cell. That's boring. All right. So let's think about what is happening. So we know the Awame Agopa is approaching Earth. We know it has a Klingon vessel inside, or it did at one time. Here we go. There's a probability question for you. Did the Klingon vessel manage to escape? Now, as we know, the Klingons have been taken in by the symbiotes, and so I would say it's improbable that they escaped. And no, they did not. So Klingon vessel is still inside the Awame, and obviously things are on high alert. Just because, I mean, it's an alien vessel, it's a big unknown, it's a big question mark, and let's see. Okay, so how does Wyn not come back to her cell? We already had one escape in the flashback, so I feel like I don't necessarily want to tread on that too much. Could it be that the security detail ordered to escort her has similarly been infiltrated by the symbiotes? Let's give that a slightly probable chance. And that's a yes. Okay. So our trio proceeds down the hall just a little ways before suddenly the security officers stop, and Wyn gives them a confused look before she hears one of them telepathically say to her, "Don't worry, we're with you." Okay, so let's see here. So what does Wyn want to do? I think her first priority is going to be going and finding the other two. So she'll ask them, where are the other two prisoners? And they say, we'll lead you to them. So they do, and we arrive at the cell containing Frakes, cell containing Krysar is just down the hall. And I know I said I didn't want to do an escape, but this isn't an escape. I meant escape in the sense of like shooting her way out or whatever. This is a prisoner release. Yeah, that's it. So security officers use their code to open the cells. Frakes and Krysar emerge, and where we had 3, we now have 5. How did the security officers become infected? Is that the right word? Anyway, how did the symbiotes make their way into the security officers? We don't know. We're not going to find that out right now. It's not important. It may be important later, though. Okay, so when let's see. We need to get out of the complex, right? So Wyn's going to take command here, and just say to these guys, show me where everyone else went. Okay, so I'm going to roll for this, not so much because I don't think the guys would know necessarily, only to see like how effective we are at locating the other Starfleet officers in a timely fashion. So like if it's a failure, it's going to take a while. If we get 2 successes, it'll be pretty quick, that sort of thing. Plus we're just kind of rolling to see if we generate momentum, threat, whatever. So we're going to do daring plus command. So let's say 13 or less, and we get 2 successes. Great. No other advantages or anything, but we do get a momentum off of that. And okay, so might hold on to that one for a reroll. I don't think I need to spend it for an advantage just yet. So, okay, so the security team take Wyn back along the corridor through the room where her hearing was being held, and to a turbo lift, that takes them up to a larger, much more open space. I'm kind of picturing that whole sort of pavilion or lobby that was in, I think it was Star Trek 4, right, where they had to bring out those ridiculous giant pneumatic window braces to keep the windows from shattering because of the storms that were being whipped up by the humpbacks, So, and see, Star Trek 4, now that's an interesting one, because that is a great example of where you could have, friendly aliens, right, who are inadvertently causing a problem. So, I'm just thinking about what our amoeboid city ship is going to be doing. It is proximate to Earth. I'm not sure if it's in orbit yet or not. Let's find out. 50-50 chance. Yes, it is. Okay, so it's in orbit. So it's pretty close. Presumably, Starfleet is mustering all of its local defenses. They did have advance warning of this thing's approach. It didn't come out of nowhere. But it's also it's not showing any immediate threat. So I think there's, a kind of a wait and see. And I'll mark that scene down as a success. Okay. The escape scene. So, so Wyn comes marching up onto this pavilion, this lobby, and of course many high-ranking Starfleet admirals, commodores, captains are here, many other officers. Kerensky is here. All the officers from her court-martial are here. And immediately the security teams that are on duty on this level of the Starfleet headquarters spring into action. But Wyn holds up her hand and she says, "I have come to help you. We have a unique understanding of what is going on with the Owame Agopa." And so we'll say that for the sake of not having to make a new character on the fly, Kerensky steps forward and she says, "I don't have much reason to believe you. But then again, you might just be telling the truth." And Wyn says, "I have no reason to lie, Commander. I am genuinely sorry for what it's worth, for what happened to Captain Galvin. It was not intentional." So, let's give Wyn a roll to see if she can kind of connect with Kerensky, make it up to her, and that's where this momentum point will definitely come in handy if I fail this. It's going to be presence plus command, so that's a 13 or less. All right. So close to getting a focus advantage off of that, but I did get 2 successes, so I guess I could spend the momentum to re-roll one of those dice and hope I get a focus success. I don't get anything else. Since I have a momentum point, I don't generate another one. So the 2 successes are kind of wasted. So then again, if I spend the momentum point and it comes up as a fail on this reroll, I don't get anything. If it comes up as another success, I get the momentum point back. If it comes up as a focus success, I don't know. What's the term for that? I don't know. Anyway, if it triggers a focus, there we go. If it triggers a focus, then I get a focus advantage too. So I think there's a better argument for spending the momentum. So let's do that. I'll re-roll. Ah, dang it! I pushed my luck. Okay, so it just comes up that was a fail. So it's just going to be 1 success total. So Kerensky recognizes the gravity of the situation to the extent that she says, we'll see what the court-martial decides. So I'll mark that scene down as a success, even though it was just 1 success. And so Kerensky says, what do you have to offer? To which Wyn replies, have you forgotten, Captain, of the Jakala? And Kerensky arches an eyebrow and she says, no, I have not. They were last seen being pulled inside this strange craft. Wyn says, indeed they were. They are still inside it as we speak. They are like us. They have merged and become as one with the Ogopa. And I think at this point Kerensky says, Lieutenant, all of this smacks quite uncomfortably of that other species that we encountered on the other side of that wormhole that called themselves the Borg. They too spoke of assimilation. And Wyn says, it is not assimilation that the Ogopa seek. They do not wish to fundamentally alter who we are or use us to increase their own power. That is what makes the Ogopa different. And so Kerensky says, well, then why are they here? And Wyn says, to teach us all about ourselves, how to be better versions of ourselves. And Kerensky says, how would they do that? To which Wyn says, let us show you. And she reaches out her hand towards Kerensky. So, I'm going to give Wyn another shot here to win Kerensky over. Again, presence plus command, I think, is the best way to do it. Really hope... The reason I spent that momentum to try and generate trigger a focus is because I have empathy. I have empathy as a focus, so... I'm really hoping to trigger a focus here. Let's see. Come on. Oh, so freaking close. A 4 and a 5, and I needed a 3. Dang it. Still, that is 2 successes. Generates a momentum die. Do we want to do a momentum spend? I know there's a friendly aliens matrix that might be handy. Let's see here. Friendly alien encounter. Okay. Oh, right. There was the whole offer hidden knowledge thing that I had last time. A lot of it is offers. That's already happened. So, yeah, I don't think so. So I might hold on to it. Let's see. Can I just spend it to generate an advantage? I think so. Add an advantage. Yeah, you can roll on the advantage matrix. Okay, cool. Okay, or roll on another matrix if you're choosing. Yeah. All right. So rolling on the advantage table might be interesting. Let's see here. Historic precedent. We're using that as we speak. Yeah, we're kind of leveraging that already. Okay. So Kerensky, I'm not going to spend anything at the moment. Kerensky stands stock still as I mark that scene down as a success. Kerensky stands stock still, and as Wyn's hand touches her cheek, there's a brief inhalation, and then she smiles as everyone, all these other officers are just watching this whole interaction somewhat stunned. What is going on? And Kerensky turns to face the admirals, the commodores, and she says, Lieutenant Cedino is right. The Iwame Ogopa is here to help us, to teach us how to be better versions of ourselves. And at that point, Wyn regains consciousness. Aha! Yes, that's the twist. It's like the one where Picard goes and lives this whole other life, except not quite extreme. What I was thinking of, what I had in the back of my mind all along, was that basically this is we started with a flashback, but then this is going to be an even bigger flashback. It's going to cut back to when Wyn was standing out on the platform outside the shuttle bay, and the sort of amoeba plasma descended in on her, And I think that is what happened, is that it gave her this vision. A vision of a future that is now past. And I think in that vision she saw what happens when you try to play the hero, when you try to be reckless, when you don't operate as a team member. The value I generated last time, we are all connected despite being worlds apart. That's it. That's what this lesson was about. So I think I'm actually going to leverage that value. And I'm going to leverage that value to generate a story advantage. And the story advantage, I think, is simply that the Iwame Ogopa, having imparted this knowledge onto Wyn, leaves her with a feeling of being like an emissary, let's say. So she's sort of been taken in by the Ogopa as, again, kind of doing some parallels with the Borg here, right? So like how Picard was turned into Locutus because the Borg recognized that it would need a sort of like a person that is recognizable and looks human or looks familiar, I guess you could say, to be sort of the Borg's mouthpiece to the Federation. This is kind of the more wholesome side of that. This is the flip side of the Locutus Gambit. Sounds like a Star Trek episode name in and of itself. But so this is where the Ogopa are kind of like, okay, so we've got this king, quote unquote. But the king can't really travel outside of the larger collective that is the Iwame, right? And so Wyn has been promoted to be the emissary, essentially. And I think the Klingon ship was pulled inside the Iwame entirely because they recognized the possibility that the Klingons would just kind of open fire and destroy the Iwame Agopa before it had a chance to do any of this. So now that Wyn has been sort of promoted and designated as the emissary of these peoples, the Iwame releases both ships. So the Jakala gets kind of unceremoniously glorped out of the giant mass that is the city ship / slime mold / space colony, and so too is the Kyushu, released from the pseudopod. And so Wyn goes back inside the shuttle bay. The doors close. She takes the helmet off, and there's Captain Galvin alive and well. All of our trusty crew are there, and including Frakes, right? Who, remember, now Wyn has had this moment in her vision where they confess their love for each other, but now we're back in this other reality. Oh no, the confession has not happened. Is it even real, or was that just her wishful thinking being fulfilled? We don't know. It's a matter for next season, I guess. I'm gonna keep the viewers coming back. Will they, won't they? Classic. Anyway, so they're all there, and Wyn just kind of looks at all of them, and she smiles. And I think she would just, without even thinking about it, just go in. Let's see. So she took her helmet off, but she'd still be kind of covered in the slime from the Agopa. So I was going to say she'd go in and hug Captain Galvin, but maybe not. So in fact, she says, Captain, I want to hug you, but, well, just look at me. And everyone has a little laugh, and there's kind of a little freeze frame. And yeah, I think we'll just wrap it up there. I don't know. There's still one scene left, right? So let's spend this momentum point to generate one more story advantage, as we are in Captain Galvin's, not in his quarters, in the I forget what the little room is called, like right off the bridge, the ready room. So we're in the ready room, and Wyn is standing at attention in front of Captain Galvin's desk. Maybe we think for a moment that she's going to get reprimanded again, but instead, Kerensky is there, Frakes is there, Timir is there, and Captain Galvin is saying, Lieutenant Junior Grade Cedino, I hereby promote you to full lieutenant for valor, bravery, and service to the Federation. And he clips the little thing onto her collar. The little gold snap indicates rank, and Wyn gives everyone smiles. Everyone smiles back, and that'll be our last scene. Roll credits. All right. That was Captain's Log, everybody. So, as promised, I have some thoughts. So, all in all, it definitely does a good job of generating Star Trek style adventures. In fact, I kind of feel like, even though this is like session 8, I want to say, not counting session 0, I could keep going for a while. Like if I didn't have anything better going on, and I didn't have all these other sort of like demands on my time and attention, I could really keep this going. And I think if I return to Captain's Log in the future, it'll be one of two ways. It'll either be just something I do for myself, like as a little just, lonely fun, or maybe if I'm dealing with some writer's block and I just want to kind of get my creative juices flowing, I might sit down, and I might not even necessarily record the session. In fact, I probably wouldn't. I would probably just be jotting down notes and just sort of creating a story for myself, and then maybe kind of like what I was originally musing about doing with this series, maybe then just like recording a quick summary of everything that happened just for posterity. So that would be one approach. Another approach would be to do it like as a stream, which I know some of the examples I looked at, in fact quite a few of the examples I looked at were done like that, as a kind of a live streamed game. And that would just, it would sort of solve the main issue that I had. So I had two main issues. One was the organization of the book, and I've kind of groused about that enough, so I'm not going to really harp on that any further. And the other issue I had, which I have touched on as well, is just simply the fact that not being a Trekkie and not being super immersed in the lore, I often found myself hitting sort of narrative roadblocks that I don't think I would be hitting if I was playing like something that was comparable, that was set in, say, the Cthulhu mythos, or the world of King Arthur, or I don't know, some other some of you may know my fandom for the old Lone Wolf game books. So if it was like if I was, even though those were solo books themselves, but if I was playing a more like freeform narrative system that was taking me through the world of Magnamund, I think I would be able to like make those sorts of decisions a lot more on the fly, a lot more sort of organically. And I'm sure there's like lots of sort of potential twists and turns that I probably missed out on just from like ignorance, So if I was streaming and I had even a handful of people tuning in, I could always take it to them, say, what do you guys think? Am I, or like somebody jumps into the comments like, hey, you're forgetting the blah, or, oh, check out blah, you might want to use them instead. And I'd be like, oh, cool, like, that's cool. Obviously with this series, I had a thought of doing that. And I know I encouraged you, gentle listeners, to sound off on the Discord or in the comments. And, there was a little bit of that. But mostly it was just kind of people saying, I'm really enjoying this, and I don't watch a lot of Star Trek either. So I'm beginning to wonder if I vastly underestimated the number of Trekkies in my listening audience. I think I might have. So that was my first mistake. But anyway, so, and of course if you're listening to this in the future, the moment has passed, sadly. But yeah, no, I might live stream it. Because like I say, I could definitely see doing a lot more with this. And in fact, as I've commented on, like, there was this weird kind of, I'm not going to say sameness, but sort of circular narrative going on where, we kept kind of coming back to the same sort of plot beats, which was really kind of eerie, actually. I mean, I've read a few sort of sample moments out of the various matrices, and like there's just a lot going on these matrices that we didn't even touch on. We didn't do a lot of like planetary exploration, and I only got to do like the planet creator matrix thing twice. I did do it twice, and man, that was fun. That came up with some really off the wall. I mean, the floating jellyfish that are like, modeled on Bronze Age Italy, like that's just wild, right? And very Star Trek too, which is cool. And then there's this whole other thing. So if you're thinking of playing Captain's Log yourself, And especially if you want a somewhat more structured approach, and honestly, I probably should have just done this. There's a free PDF called the Captain's Log Supplemental. I think it's available through the Modifius website or DriveThruRPG. And what it is, I printed it out just in case I needed it. I never did. But it's got a couple things in it. So, first of all, it has all the, it has, what do they call it? The lower decks, it's just lower decks starships, right. So they actually have a lower decks campaign guide for Star Trek Adventures. And so they took all the starships from lower decks and statted them up for Captain's Log, because basically they hadn't secured the rights to lower decks when they published Captain's Log. So this is them doing that. And then the other piece here, and this is, I promised I wasn't going to harp on the book, but I'm going to just take one more shot at it, because it says here, there was a lot of great content that we had to cut near the end of development in order to keep the book to a manageable and affordable size. However, with the joys of digital publishing, we're able to provide the content to you now as a supplemental PDF. Look, I totally get it. I've been in positions where I've had to cut back on projects. Sometimes your vision exceeds your budget, or at least like the targeted price point of the product. I hear that. I wish they had maybe cut down on the huge section in the beginning of the book that like kind of explains Star Trek, because as I've said before, it does explain it. Me being a relative novice to Star Trek, like it did fill in a few blanks for me, but it also didn't. It's impossible for it to go into the level of detail that was required for me in terms of generating story. I still found myself having to look up tons of information. So I'm not saying they shouldn't have had a little primer at the beginning, but I think it could have been cut down a bit, just so that they could have included what's in this PDF, which is mission prompts. And so the mission prompts are basically, prefab missions. And they're just like, they're one page each, one or two pages, I should say. And so the first one is called Mission of Mercy. And it gives you the opening Captain's Log. We've been selected to participate in an urgent mission of mercy. Recent natural disasters and already challenging environmental instability have taken their toll on the inhabitants of a local planet. With their existing crops destroyed and the viability of new ones in question, the inhabitants are barreling toward a global famine. We are on our way to deliver some much-needed supplies. Unfortunately, a majority of the planet's inhabitants believe this famine to be some sort of spiritual punishment from their gods. They may well try to sabotage the salvation efforts. Then gives you possible encounters and a bunch of prompt questions. The nature of the supplies has been deliberately left vague to give you more flexibility in your planning. Are the supplies physical things like food and clothes? Are they machines that have to be built? What is making the future crops on the planet likely to fail? And goes on like that. So, the most pressing question, and one that should be asked multiple times throughout this adventure, is whether or not your crew's efforts will be undermined by the planet's inhabitants. Feel free to get creative with the kind of planet, taking ideas from or rolling on Strange New Worlds charts starting on page 294. So, just stuff like that. And yeah, I contemplated using one of these, but honestly, the sort of random rolls that I was generating, were creating a pretty strong through line narrative. However, weirdly circular it felt at times. Whereas these are much more in the spirit of TOS, where they're not really related to each other, and so you could do a TOS style Captain's Log by just starting with Mission of Mercy and just playing through every single one, of which there are quite a few actually, including one called Host Organism. So I saw that after all of our stuff had played out. But let's see. Ferengi show up in this one. A Ferengi marauder dropped out of a warp and hailed us, claiming they had evidence one of the admirals is under the control of a neural parasite. I suspect this is just a ploy by the Ferengi to glean valuable information about Starfleet's defensive posture, but the claim is too serious to ignore. This mission creates a combustible powder keg of characters and factors that you must manage in order for the meeting of the Admiralty to conclude successfully. You'll have to keep each admiral happy, prevent the Ferengi from disrupting the proceedings, and investigate the neural parasite threat, all in the same mission. So, I mean, that's the other thing, is that, I mean, like, since these have had some level of foresight or forethought put into them, yeah, I think I guess that's the other thing I would just say about the Captain's Log missions that I generated, is they all felt a bit, I don't want to say one-dimensional, but certainly very straightforward. You know, there's very action-oriented, very like, this is happening, now this is happening. So I'm glad that at the end I was able to kind of mess around a little bit, do the in medias res beginning with the flashback, and then, you know, the cut to it was all a dream, you know, or it was all a vision in this case. Very cool, you know, and I don't know, playing through some of those prefab missions probably would have given me similar levels of plot complexity, but, you know, for a first outing, you know, just sort of taking the matrices for a spin, I think it was fine. You know, I don't really have an issue with that per se, but yeah, if I were to do it again, I might just bust out those missions and, like I said, do the TOS approach. Just play straight through them, maybe. But anyway, that's it for now. Thank you for coming along with me on this journey, and listening to the adventures of no longer junior Lieutenant Cedino. Like I say, she'll probably show up if I ever play or run Star Trek Adventures, either as a PC or an NPC, and I really like the 2350s as a setting, so that's probably what I would go with if I were to run Star Trek Adventures. And as I said at the top of this episode, I'm looking forward to the second edition, so don't hold your breath. I won't be running Star Trek Adventures for the podcast anytime soon, because I do want to wait on that second edition first. But in the meantime, we will be getting back to our group games coming up next, and that's all I'll say for now. But I guess I would just caution you to look out for monsters. Until then.